What happens when two of country music's most beloved voices clash over something so personal it shakes the very foundation of their friendship? Well, you're about to find out, because what went down between Trisha Yearwood and Kelly Clarkson during a recent taping of The Kelly Clarkson Show has left everyone in the studio absolutely stunned. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really caused this explosive confrontation. The atmosphere in the studio was electric as Kelly Clarkson welcomed her longtime friend, Trisha Yearwood, to the show. Both women had been looking forward to this interview for weeks, with Kelly personally reaching out to Trisha to discuss her latest cookbook and upcoming tour dates. What started as a friendly reunion between two powerhouse performers quickly transformed into one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime television history. "Trisha, it's so wonderful to have you here," Kelly began with her signature warm smile, settling into her chair across from the country legend. "I have to say, your new cookbook is absolutely incredible. I tried the peach cobbler recipe last weekend and my kids devoured it." Trisha shifted slightly in her seat, her expression brightening at the compliment. "Oh, that makes my heart so happy. Kelly, you know how much I love sharing these family recipes. That peach cobbler has been in Garth's family for 3 generations. Speaking of family recipes," Kelly continued, her tone remaining conversational, "I noticed something interesting when I was flipping through the book. There's a cornbread recipe in there that looks remarkably similar to one my grandmother used to make. Same ingredients, same technique, even the same little note about using cast iron." The comment hung in the air for a moment, and viewers could see Trisha's demeanor shift almost imperceptibly. Her smile remained, but something flickered behind her eyes. "Well, you know how these old Southern recipes get passed around, Kelly. Great minds think alike, I suppose." Kelly nodded, but there was something in her voice that suggested she wasn't quite satisfied with that explanation. Of course, it's just that this particular recipe, well, it's quite specific. My grandmother always said she created it herself, back in the 1950s when she was struggling to feed 6 kids on a tight budget. She even had this little story about accidentally doubling the honey one day and discovering it made the cornbread perfect. Trisha's hands tensed slightly on her lap, though she maintained her composure. "That's a sweet story, Kelly. Honey really does make all the difference in cornbread, doesn't it? I've been making that recipe for years, ever since I started cooking seriously." "I'm sure you have," Kelly replied, and now there was an unmistakable edge creeping into her voice. "The thing is, Trisha, I shared that exact story, including the detail about doubling the honey by accident, when you came to my house for dinner 2 years ago. Remember, we spent the whole evening talking about our grandmothers and their cooking secrets." The studio audience sensed the shift in energy, and a palpable tension began to fill the space. Trisha straightened in her chair, her media training kicking in as she attempted to navigate the increasingly uncomfortable situation. "Kelly, I think there might be some confusion here," Trisha said carefully, her southern accent becoming more pronounced as stress crept into her voice. "I've been collecting family recipes for decades. Sometimes the stories blend together. You know how it is." Kelly leaned forward slightly, her expression serious but still maintaining the veneer of a professional interview. "Trisha, I need to ask you something directly, and I hope you'll be honest with me because our friendship means too much to just let this slide. Did you take my grandmother's recipe and put it in your cookbook without asking permission or giving credit?" The question hit like a thunderbolt through the studio. Camera operators exchanged glances, producers shifted nervously in the wings, and the audience sat in stunned silence. This was not the lighthearted cooking segment they had expected to witness. Trisha's face flushed slightly, and for the first time since the interview began, her composed facade cracked. "Kelly, I cannot believe you would ambush me like this on your own show. If you had concerns about a recipe, you could have called me privately." "I did call you privately," Kelly shot back, her voice rising slightly. 3 times, actually, and your assistant kept saying you were unavailable. So I figured maybe we could clear this up here, woman to woman, friend to friend." "This is hardly the appropriate venue for this kind of discussion," Trisha replied, her tone becoming defensive. "You're putting me in an impossible position on live television." Kelly shook her head firmly. "Actually, we're not live, Trisha. This is a taping, which means we could edit this out if you just tell me the truth. Did you or did you not take a recipe that I shared with you in confidence and publish it as your own?" The confrontation was reaching a boiling point, and everyone in the studio could feel the friendship between these two women hanging by a thread. Trisha's eyes flashed, with a mixture of anger and embarrassment as she realized there was no easy way out of this situation. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity before Trisha finally spoke, her voice trembling with barely contained emotion. "Kelly, you want the truth? Fine, yes, I remembered your grandmother's cornbread recipe. Yes, I thought it was wonderful, but I never claimed it was exclusively mine, and I certainly never intended to hurt you." Kelly's expression softened momentarily, as if she was hoping for a different kind of admission. Trisha, that's not what I'm seeing in the book. It's listed under Yearwood Family Favorites with a story about how you learned it from your own grandmother in Georgia. Because that's how I remember it, Trisha insisted, her voice growing stronger. When you shared that story with me, it reminded me of something similar my grandmother used to make. Maybe the details got mixed up in my mind over time. Mixed up. Kelly's voice rose an octave. Trisha, you literally wrote that your grandmother told you about accidentally doubling the honey. Those were my exact words about my grandmother's mistake. How do you accidentally remember someone else's family story as your own? The audience was completely captivated now, witnessing what felt like a private argument between two friends playing out in public. Trisha glanced toward the cameras, suddenly very aware that this conversation would be seen by millions of people. Kelly, please, Trisha said, her tone becoming more pleading. Can we discuss this after the show? This is becoming really uncomfortable for everyone here. Uncomfortable? Kelly laughed, but there was no humor in it. You know what's uncomfortable? Finding out that someone I trusted enough to invite into my home, someone I shared my most precious family memories with, turned around and published those memories as her own for profit. Trisha's face turned red, and her professional composure began to crumble. For profit. Kelly, do you have any idea how insulting that is? I've been cooking and sharing recipes long before I ever met you. I don't need to steal anyone's family traditions. Then explain it to me, Kelly demanded, leaning forward in her chair. Explain how a recipe that's been in my family for 70 years somehow ended up in your cookbook with my grandmother's exact technique and her personal story attached to it. Maybe because good recipes travel. Kelly, Trisha snapped, her southern charm finally giving way to raw frustration. Maybe because there are only so many ways to make cornbread. And maybe because not everything in this world belongs exclusively to you. The words hung in the air like a slap, and Kelly visibly recoiled. The audience gasped audibly, sensing that the conversation had crossed a line from which there might be no return. Belongs to me. Kelly's voice was quiet now, but filled with hurt. Trisha, we're not talking about some generic recipe here. We're talking about a story my grandmother told me on her deathbed about how she fed her children during the hardest times of her life. That story means everything to my family. Trisha's anger faltered as she saw the genuine pain in Kelly's eyes. Kelly, I never meant to ... You never meant to what? Take something that wasn't yours, or you never meant to get caught. The question was like a dagger, and Trisha's face went pale. How dare you question my integrity like this? I have built my entire career on honesty and authenticity. Have you though? Kelly pressed on, clearly past the point of caring about maintaining their friendship. Because right now, it seems like you've built part of your cookbook on my family's stories. That is enough. Trisha stood up abruptly, her microphone squeaking with feedback. I came here as a favor to you, Kelly, to support your show and celebrate our friendship. I will not sit here and be accused of theft by someone who clearly values publicity over personal relationships. Kelly remained seated, but her voice carried throughout the studio. The only one who brought publicity into this is you. Trisha, I tried to handle this privately, remember? You're the one who chose to publish my grandmother's recipe without asking. I don't have to listen to this, Trisha said, reaching up to remove her microphone pack. I've been in this business long enough to know when someone is trying to create drama for ratings. Drama for ratings. Kelly stood up now too, her face flushed with anger. Trisha, this isn't about ratings. This is about you taking something precious from my family and passing it off as your own. This is about trust and friendship and basic human decency. Trisha fumbled with her microphone, her hands shaking slightly from adrenaline. I'm done with this conversation. Kelly, when you're ready to have an adult discussion instead of a public lynching, you know where to find me. Adult discussion? Kelly's voice cracked with emotion. I'm not the one who ran away when confronted with the truth. I'm not the one who chose to publish someone else's family legacy without permission. The studio had fallen completely silent except for the sound of Trisha struggling with her audio equipment. Producers stood frozen in the wings, unsure whether to intervene or let the scene play out. This was television gold, but at what cost to both women's reputations and friendship? Fine, Kelly, Trisha said, finally managing to disconnect her microphone pack and letting it drop onto the chair behind her. If that's really what you think of me after all these years of friendship, then maybe we never knew each other as well as we thought we did. The sound of the microphone hitting the chair echoed through the silent studio like a gunshot. Kelly watched in disbelief as her longtime friend prepared to walk away from their confrontation without any real resolution. Don't you dare turn this around on me, Trisha, Kelly called out, her voice carrying clearly across the studio without the need for amplification. I know exactly who you are. The question is, do you? Trisha stopped dead in her tracks, her back still turned to Kelly and the audience. For a moment, it seemed like she might reconsider, might turn around and try to salvage what was left of their friendship. Instead, she slowly turned her head to look back over her shoulder. You know who I am. Trisha's voice was dangerously quiet. Kelly, I've been married to one of country music's biggest stars for over 20 years. I've written cookbooks, hosted television shows, and built a brand based on Southern hospitality and family values. I think I know exactly who I am. Apparently, you're someone who takes other people's family recipes and claims them as your own. Kelly shot back without missing a beat. Apparently, you're someone who values your brand more than your friendships. Trisha whirled around completely now, her eyes blazing with fury. My brand, Kelly. Everything I do comes from the heart. Every recipe in that cookbook represents something meaningful to me, including my grandmother's cornbread. Kelly challenged, yes, including that cornbread. Trisha exploded, throwing her hands up in exasperation. Because when you shared that story with me, it touched something in my soul. It reminded me of my own childhood, my own struggles in the kitchen, my own family's traditions. Maybe I did incorporate elements of your story into mine, but that's what happens when people share their lives with each other. Kelly stared at her in stunned silence for a moment before responding. So you're admitting it then? You took my story and made it yours. I'm admitting that your story inspired me. Yes. Trisha's voice cracked with emotion. I'm admitting that. When you talked about your grandmother's struggles to feed her family, it reminded me of my own grandmother's sacrifices. Maybe I did blur the lines between your experience and mine, but I never intended to steal anything from you. The audience was completely riveted, watching this raw emotional exchange between two women they had always seen as friends. Some were recording on their phones despite studio policies, sensing that they were witnessing television history in the making. Intention doesn't matter. Trisha, Kelly said, her voice heavy with disappointment. The result is the same. My family's story is now in your book, attributed to your family. My grandmother's legacy is now part of your brand. Your grandmother's legacy. Trisha laughed bitterly. Kelly, do you honestly believe that your grandmother was the first woman in America to accidentally double the honey in cornbread? Do you really think that story is so unique that no one else could have experienced something similar? Kelly's face went completely white. How can you be so callous about this? We're not talking about some generic cooking mishap. We're talking about a specific story with specific details that you heard directly from me. And maybe, just maybe, those details resonated with me because I've lived through something similar. Trisha shouted, her carefully maintained composure completely shattered. Now, maybe I've spent my entire adult life trying to honor the women who came before me, just like you have, by stealing their stories and calling them your own, by sharing the love and traditions that connect all of us. Trisha's eyes were filling with tears now, but her voice remained strong. Kelly, I thought you of all people would understand what it means to carry on a grandmother's legacy. Kelly shook her head slowly, looking genuinely heartbroken. I do understand that, Trisha. That's exactly why this hurts so much. You took something that wasn't yours to share. I shared something that moved me deeply when you told it to me. I shared it because it represented everything I believe about family and food and love. Trisha wiped at her eyes, smearing her carefully applied makeup. If that makes me a thief in your eyes, then so be it. It makes you someone I don't recognize anymore. Kelly replied quietly, and those words seemed to hit Trisha harder than all the shouting had. Trisha stood there for a long moment, looking around the studio at the cameras, the crew, the audience, all watching her with rapt attention. When she spoke again, her voice was steady but filled with sadness. You know what, Kelly, maybe you're right. Maybe you don't recognize me anymore. Maybe I don't recognize you either. The Kelly Clarkson I thought I knew would have called me with concerns instead of ambushing me on national television. She would have given me the benefit of the doubt. Instead of assuming the worst about my motives, I tried calling you. Kelly protested weakly. 3 phone calls over several weeks is not trying. Kelly, it's making a token effort so you can say you tried when you publicly humiliate me later. Trisha's voice was getting stronger again, fed by righteous indignation. If this really mattered to you, if our friendship really mattered, you would have shown up at my door. You would have demanded a face-to-face conversation. Kelly looked genuinely taken aback by this accusation. I didn't think I needed to. Trisha, I thought a phone call would be enough between friends. Between friends? Trisha laughed harshly. Friends don't set traps for each other on television shows. Friends don't use their platform to destroy each other's reputations over a cornbread recipe. I'm not trying to destroy your reputation, Kelly said, but her voice lacked conviction. I just wanted an explanation, an acknowledgement, maybe an apology. An apology for what? For being inspired by your story. For letting it influence my... Kelly's face crumpled as the weight of Trisha's words hit her. Trisha, please don't leave like this. We can work through this. We've been friends for too long to let it end this way. Can we though? Trisha asked, her voice hollow now. Kelly, you just spent the last 20 minutes questioning my integrity, my character, my entire career, all on camera for the world to see. How do we come back from that? By talking it through like adults, Kelly pleaded, taking a step toward her friend, by being honest with each other about what happened and figuring out how to move forward. Trisha shook her head sadly. Honesty, Kelly. You want to talk about honesty. Then let me be completely honest with you right now. When I wrote that cornbread recipe, I was thinking about you. I was thinking about that beautiful evening we spent together, sharing stories about the women who shaped us. I was thinking about how connected I felt to you in that moment. Kelly's expression softened slightly. Trisha, let me finish. Trisha interrupted, holding up her hand. I was so moved by your grandmother's story that it made me remember my own grandmother differently. It made me see her struggles in a new light, and when I sat down to write about cornbread, all of those feelings, all of those memories, yours and mine, they all blended together in my heart. So you admit that you used my story, Kelly said quietly. I admit that your story became part of my story. Yes, Trisha replied with painful honesty. I admit that I should have been more careful about giving you credit. I admit that I made a mistake. But Kelly, the way you've chosen to handle this mistake, the way you've made me feel like a criminal instead of a friend who made an error in judgment, that's something I'm not sure I can get past. Kelly stood there in stunned silence, clearly not expecting such a raw admission. The studio audience was equally quiet, absorbed in this deeply personal moment between two women they had watched evolve from strangers, two friends, to something much more complicated. I never meant to make you feel like a criminal, Kelly said softly. I just felt betrayed. When I saw that recipe in your book, with my grandmother's story attached to it, I felt like you had stolen something sacred from my family. And I understand that feeling, Kelly, I really do, Trisha said, her own voice becoming gentler. But you have to understand how it feels to be ambushed like this. You have to understand how it feels to have someone you care about assume the absolute worst about your motives without giving you a chance to explain. I'm giving you a chance to explain right now. No, Kelly, you're giving me a chance to confess. There's a difference. Trisha's voice was gaining strength again. You've already decided that I'm guilty. You've already decided that I'm a thief and a liar. This whole conversation has been you trying to get me to admit to crimes I never intended to commit. Kelly's face flushed red. That's not true, Trisha. I came into this hoping you could give me an explanation that would make everything okay. Again, did you though? Or did you come into this hoping to get a confession that would justify the way you've been feeling about me for weeks? Trisha's question hit like a lightning bolt. Kelly, be honest with yourself. When you planned this confrontation, were you hoping to repair our friendship, or were you hoping to get closure by proving that you were right to feel betrayed? The question hung in the air, and Kelly's inability to answer immediately spoke volumes. Her mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. That's what I thought, Trisha said with devastating quiet. Kelly, I've made mistakes in this situation, I'll own that, but you've made mistakes too. You chose public humiliation over private conversation. You chose confrontation over communication. You chose to assume the worst about someone who has always been nothing but loyal to you. Trisha, please, Kelly's voice cracked with emotion. Please don't walk away from our friendship over this. We can figure this out. One can edit this segment. We can start over. We can ... double quotes edit the segment. Trisha laughed bitterly. Kelly, do you hear yourself right now? You're offering to edit out the part where you accused me of theft on your television show. That's your solution to this problem. I'm trying to find a way to fix this. The way to fix this was to pick up the phone and have a real conversation with me weeks ago. The way to fix this was to give me the benefit of the doubt, instead of assuming I was trying to hurt you. The way to fix this was to treat me like a friend instead of like a defendant in your personal court of justice. Kelly's eyes filled with tears as the reality of what had just transpired began to sink in. Trisha, I'm sorry. I handled this all wrong. I was hurt and angry, and I let those feelings cloud my judgment. I appreciate that apology, Kelly, I really do, Trisha said, her voice gentle but firm. But apologies don't undo the damage that's been done here today. Every person in this studio, every person who watches this show, they've now seen you question my integrity and character on national television. How do I come back from that? We'll figure it out together, Kelly said desperately. No, Kelly, we won't. Trisha's words were final, decisive. Because after today, after this conversation, I don't think we can trust each other anymore. I don't think I can trust you not to use our private moments as ammunition for public confrontations. And I don't think you can trust me not to be inspired by the stories you share with me. The finality in Trisha's voice seemed to break something. In Kelly, she sank back into her chair, looking defeated and heartbroken.